Welcome to this, the latest of the podcast series for the Future Farm Resilience Fund being delivered by NIAB, working in conjunction with AKC and Savills. My name's Will Vaughan-France, your host, and joining me for a conversation today is my colleague Peter Craven, who has recently completed a Nuffield Scholarship, where he's been looking at the formula that makes family business success. And I'm really looking forward to talking about this with Peter. Obviously, this is a really significant issue to the sort of agricultural transition that's taking place now, as it has always been significant. So welcome, Peter. Do you want to just perhaps introduce a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yes, hi, Will. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Yes, so my background, I'm from Lincolnshire, South Lincolnshire, between Boston and Spalding. So I grew up on a family farming business, and we were specialising in vegetables, but the thing that was making the money was potatoes. So I spent a lot of years in South Lincolnshire trying to grow the perfect M&S potato, if we're allowed to. Other supermarkets are available.
I think we're allowed to mention high-end retailers. That's okay.
And then I went on a course, a Worshipful Company of Farmers course in 2018. And really, I say that woke me up from a deep sleep. I think I'd been busy slumbering along, and I thought we were doing a pretty good job. But when I got in that environment with a very good peer group around me, I realised that maybe we weren't quite as good, or I wasn't quite as good as I thought. And I came out of that course with a sort of a refreshed passion for learning. And first time round, I'd been at Y College many moons ago and studied agribusiness management. And I enjoyed my time there, shall we say. But I'd had this sort of renewed passion for learning. And I came out of that thinking, I've got to do more. What can I do? How can I get involved? And one of the things that I was lucky enough to get involved with was the Nuffield.
And so here we are now. You've done a Nuffield Scholarship, which has involved quite a bit of travel. I think you overlapped with COVID as well, didn't you? So which makes this more challenging.
So here we go. I'll make you smile now. So you have to sign a contract when you take a Nuffield Scholarship, and you are duty bound to attend the CSC, the Combined Scholars Conference. I think the year just gone, it was in Norfolk in UK. But the year I did it, I had to, duty bound, here we go, had to be on an island called Tangalooma Island between the Gold Coast and the Sunshine Coast. So I had to be there. And on
You're
day
making
one of
this sound onerous.
So yes, terrible situation to have to deal with. But day one of the conference, I sat next to a lady that was from Australia, and we'd all flown in from I think it was 17 different countries. It was March the 20th, and COVID was really kicking off, and it had really ramped up in the week or two before. And I'd been over in New Zealand. It hadn't affected my meetings. Only one meeting got cancelled because of COVID. But the lady next to me, she said, I don't feel very well. And she said, more worrying, she said, two of my friends don't feel very well either. And she said, if I tell anyone, I wonder if they'll lock us in our rooms, because we were just the ones on this island. And then I suddenly thought, oh my God, it feels like Lord of the Flies here. We're going to end up on an island in the other side of the world, and we're all going to be locked in. So I said, will you excuse me? And I went to reception. And I said, can you get me the next boat off this island, please, as quickly as possible? And this was day one of the conference. And the lady said, well, you've just missed it. It went 2 minutes ago. And I looked over my shoulder, and two of our gang, they'd worked it out and they got on that boat. Anyway, I got on the next one, which was 4 p.m. And that was on the Monday. I had no flight home, and rang my wife up on the boat over to the mainland, said, can you help me? It was 2 o'clock in the morning. Goodness, I didn't realise. And skyscanner.net, here we go, dropping another plug.
Yeah, very useful.
Incredibly useful at 2 a.m. UK time to find me a flight home. That was on the Monday, flew home via Dubai, and all flights across the world stopped on the Friday. So skin of your teeth stuff.
You were in danger of being trapped for some months on a island near the Sunshine Coast, which I imagine is much worse than it sounds. So so you had a little bit of an interesting start. You've just completed, and I think last week you had the Nuffield conference and presented the report, and having read the report, I thought it's very interesting how you pick up on looking at what makes family businesses successful, and I want to explore a few of the things that came from there. And I think one of the things that's always a bit of a chat, it perhaps creates an image, is this idea of a family business. So in my mind, I get this sort of image of probably some sort of mixed farming family business in Devon that looks rather bucolically beautiful, and everyone in the family is working together, and it's about more the practical. But actually, that's a totally bizarre basis to have. So what do we mean by family business, and what does it encompass? What makes a family business a family business?
Well, certainly in farming, 97% of all UK farming businesses are family businesses. I haven't answered your question there. What is a family business? But it's predominantly.
Might be easier to answer the question I didn't ask, which is what is not a family business? That might be more narrowing it down.
Here we go. Well, it's predominantly one that's owned or controlled by a single family. It's normally involving 2 or more family members in its operations or management. And normally that's something that would be passed down through the generations. So it's sort of multi-generational, and that in itself is a problem. If you like, it's a nice problem to have, but in the olden days, when grandpa got to 60 or 65, his hips would be shot and he'd be sat in the chair, or he'd be retired. Well, now they're getting new hips. They're running marathons at 90, and they're very much wanting to play an active role in the business, because that's who they are. They've put blood, sweat and tears into these businesses, and why shouldn't they? So then it becomes, and there's this lovely picture where the word "me" in front of a mirror, and looking back it says the word "we," and it's sort of me to we sort of mentality. So it's not about how do I make a single decision. It's how do we make decisions together as a family. And I guess that was really something that I was finding hard in our own family business. And it was something that I wanted to understand. How do the best families in business get along? Because let's face it, just getting along with family is hard, but working with family as well, it's really hard stuff, this is. So how do those best families do it? Is there a secret? And so that's really what I was out to look for.
So it's an interesting concept, isn't it? There's a lot of the family farming businesses, because you've got a work life which overlaps with a family life, which is also taking place at the place you would call home. And so there's quite a lot at stake, isn't there? Because if one is tricky, it overlaps into the others. But how do those businesses that are being researched, do they have a way of separating those different parts of life? How do they manage that sort of relationship that they have between people as professional peers and people as family members, and this idea of the home and the workplace being the same? And perhaps a lot of people who non-farming would now understand this a little bit from having to work from home quite a lot over the last 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's you talk about love and emotion as well, Will. These things, they're powerful. And you sort of put money into the mix as well, and they say love and money are a powerful mix. And how do you manage that? So you've got to have some structures. You've got to have some, you can call it governance, and whether that's family governance, business governance, but it's really having a plan and having some clear roles and responsibilities, and just drawing some lines between the stuff, because it can so easily get blurred. And it's tough. It's really tough when your employer is your father, your mother. That it's a weird. It's weird and special at the same time.
In my own farming business, I have one that's I think is possibly even more weird than that, because I'm actually employer of my father. which that creates a whole nother dynamic that's quite interesting, and it actually works quite well, but it's sort of a bit of a strange one. He wants me to buy the tractor, I don't, because I have to pay for it. It's the reverse. You talk quite a lot in the report about something that I quite an interesting approach, which was the family charter, and it made me think a little bit about partnership agreements and things like that, which I've been seeing in the past, that probably actually often deal with how people interact in a business, but don't deal with how people interact outside of the business as well. So perhaps what makes up a family charter, and what makes it an effective document and structure to operate with?
Yeah, this family charter, I'd never heard of it before, and I first came across it in New Zealand, and a chap there, he was explaining they'd borrowed a lot of money from the bank, and the bank manager had insisted that they had great systems in place, and that their financial systems were second to none. But the banks were lending up to 65% of the value of the assets. So they were really up to their armpits in these businesses, lending them money. But they weren't worried at all about the business. The businesses were great. The bank managers, they were worried about the family, and if Jim and Bob can't get on together. And it was kind of explained to me that it was almost a way of the family protecting itself from themselves, if that makes sense, and finding ways that they can work together. So really, and what I hadn't realized was that everybody's got a family charter. It was explained to me everybody's got a family charter. And I said, well, no, I've never even heard of it. And he's going, no, you will have got some ideas, but it might not be in your head. And what this was a written document. So it brought the family together to produce a written document. So it wasn't just in one person's head what was going to happen and what they thought should happen. It was talked about and discussed openly. And there was transparency between family members as to what was going on, not just now, but also in the future. And so it was really, yes, there could be a plan. Dad, uncle, father, grandpa, they could all have an idea, but they might all be different. And hang on a minute, are we going in the same direction here? So you have to talk about this stuff and agree. Otherwise, I mean, there was a chap told me, he said a family farm, they all jumped in the car to go on holiday. One had got skis, one had got his Speedos on, one had got tickets to a concert. And the first one drove through the night in one direction, then the next one took over. He drove in another direction, and in the morning they got nowhere. And so you've got to agree where you're going.
It's a great description of sort of a relatable way of describing, and even actually down to when they are going to the same place, of course, the routes that people might take. And I think this was something you mentioned in your Nuffield talk, or in the report. I think it was in the report that if you're all having dinner at the same restaurant in the city of London and you all went there from this broadly the same location, you'd all potentially take a different route to get there. Some might be only slightly different, some might be very different. And that can cause fundamental disagreement, kind of if the route is different, even where you get the same end point.
I think there's a hierarchical thing as well, Will. So grandpa or father, and there's sort of you in the pecking order. You're, as a child, you do as you're told. And
well, not always.
Not always. If you can get away with it. But it's understanding that and how does that work? So, I mean, it was explained to me that if you come to a meeting with two solutions, so everybody around the table, so we're going to talk about a problem, or want everybody to come to the meeting and talk about the problem. We've got to work it out. Well, what are we going to do? But everybody has to come with two solutions. And so straight away, grandpa, grandma, whoever's there, business partners, brothers, you're not straight away. The mindset is different. There's not one solution here. even that person who may have may be the dominant person, they've got two solutions. There's two different ideas
I
here.
suppose it's quite a neat way of reducing the emotional connection to one idea, and this sense then that you've either won or lost. That there's because your own loyalty is no longer to one single idea when you go into a meeting. It sounds to me like quite a neat trick, actually, to manage your own expectations as an individual. Less so about even perhaps managing other people's in the room.
Yeah, it's just another trick of understanding how you can bring each other closer together and not keep butting heads. Really, that's the bit that's the problem.
So what about the role of external people within this as well? I mean, I guess it's maybe a bit easier as businesses get bigger because you've got more scope for bringing people, but it could be employees internally. So, do some businesses perhaps have like a sort of a business CEO who is not a family member, or a chairman of a board that isn't a family member, or a finance manager isn't, or in a smaller case, the smaller businesses that can't just have an internal employee, might be the bank manager, or it might be another professional advisor who sits there to do the businesses that work better have that, or is it not part? Is it a part of the formula in some and not others? And how might they actually introduce it and manage it if it is relevant?
Do you mean a referee, Will?
Well,
do they have a whistle?
Maybe
I know exactly.
I mean, I don't know. Do they need a whistle? I suppose a referee or a sort of arbiter to, or perhaps yes. I'm trying to work out whether we're thinking of a football field or a boxing ring at the moment.
Here we go. Well, somewhere in between. I mean, you're absolutely right. I'm going to answer the question in two totally different ways. So yes, it in some instances it's absolutely crucial that there is somebody in that room that can take some of the emotion out of the situation and that can help bring some logical, sensible reasoning and argument and sort of just keep things on an even keel. So yes, there are certain scenarios where that is absolutely true. But I've got a couple of good friends in Lincolnshire, and they run one of the biggest vegetable packing businesses in the country, and they haven't got any of that. So just because it works for one doesn't mean to say it's going to work for another. And one thing I quickly found, and I wrote it probably at the start of my report, was when you've seen one family business, you've seen one family business. That's all. They're all absolutely different, and they all have different characters. They've all come from different starting places, and to say there is one way of dealing with this is wrong. And so it's more complicated, it's more nuanced, and what works for some will not work for others.
It's quite nuanced as to what works for one business or another. But that's quite a nice thing, isn't it? Because it means that nothing is wrong. If it works for you, it's not your business and your family. It's not wrong. It's not. There isn't one way of doing it, is there?
There isn't one way to do it, and it's probably nice that there isn't, but it makes it more difficult because you can't just follow a process. You can't just read a book.
There's not a formula.
So is there a formula? There's a structure, and I've written some of the structure.
That's also to say that your title is The Formula Family Business, and I've just said, there's not a formula. I'm sort of proposing that idea.
Here we go. I'm going to challenge you because there is a solution, and farmers spend all day, every day wanting solutions. That's what their specialism is, solutions finders. And I'm certain that this family charter is a brilliant solution to bringing families together and to having some of these conversations. And yes, they might be awkward. Yes, they're difficult. Yes, they're hard. Actually, what do we want? Do we want to do this? Do I want to do something else? So I was talking to somebody the other day. There was two sons, two daughters in a farming business. and they sat down. They actually asked them what they wanted to do. Well, it ended up the two boys didn't want to farm, and the two daughters did, and that's what's happening today. The daughters are farming it, and it's funny what happens when you ask somebody what they want, yeah, why we're doing any of this.
It's the danger of assumptions, isn't it? And classically can happen in any situation in lots of different parts of life. But I guess one of the things that's then sort of interesting from that is how people find purpose within a business. And if you look at really strong businesses, whether they're family ones or not, it's often really clear what they do and why they do it. And they know why they're there. And how important is that sort of why to a family farming business, and perhaps farming businesses in general? I wonder whether this is often we understand this.
There was a guy I met, a guy called Hort Schultz, and he was the president of the Ritz-Carlton. Incredible guy, and he sits on a lot of boards, and he said that most people in the world, they've got no idea where they're going. He said 95% of businesses, this is a lot, they've got no idea where they're going. They understand what they do, their mission, but they don't understand where they're going. And he said this is really important. So we have to understand our why. And so this is one of the places that the family charter starts with, is why are we doing any of this? Why are we getting out of bed? Why are we changing that irrigator on a Sunday evening at 10 o'clock? Why are we missing our children's recorder recital? I don't know whether that you might want to miss that.
I don't know. I think you may want to miss that one. I was thinking it might be something like, that it's a bit like the sort of probably the parents' race in the sports day. It's sort of very missable. But maybe you don't want to miss out on the football game, the hockey game, or the parents' evening, depending on how it's going.
Yeah. So I've asked a lot of people why are they doing all of this, and they come back and they tell me all these different things. And from passion, they've said, well, financial success or flexibility, and their enjoyment, independence, and this emotional connection to the land. But you ask them again and again, and some people are really flummoxed that they've never actually thought about why they're doing this. They're the good ones that are coming back. Most of the time, they're struggling to think why they're doing it. And I've had lots of people come back the next day on the phone or in an email a month later and said, we want to be happy, we want to get along, and we want to do well. That's what our why is. And really, that's the sort of our guiding family vision. Stick it at the top of the page. And when the next time we're thinking about having an argument over something, hang on a minute. Why are we doing this? Hang on, we want to be happy, we want to get along, we want to do well. This is a really good guiding light for and vision for the family in business.
I think it probably, in many cases, it might also be good for aspects of it for families, even not in business together, actually, just as households even. What are we trying to do? Where are we trying to get to? What do we want to achieve for ourselves, for our kids? And if you've got something that you know why you're doing it, then you've got something that can motivate you. Whereas if you're going into a tough time thinking, I don't really know why I'm doing this, I mean, it's going to be quite hard to find the energy to get through. And I think that's probably something that's a challenge for a lot of businesses through this agricultural transition, is trying to work out why are we here? What are we trying to achieve for ourselves? And then it becomes very draining as a result. One of the things that's interesting specific to a family business, I think is a bit more unique to family business as opposed to non-family businesses, is that people come into the business because they are family and not necessarily in the structure. Ordinarily, there's a recruitment process, there's a published job role, as you're interviewed against it. There's a number of candidates going for the role, but you have people who come into the business because they're part of the family. And how do the businesses that have this sort of formula for success manage that process of sort of, let's say, recruiting the family member into the business, putting them into a place where they have the right skills, or training those people to be able to fulfill a role within the business that's rewarding for all of the parties, rather than just placing it, well, you're sort of, you're in the family, so you can go and plough that field, which and it turns out they hate machinery and they hate ploughing. and they actually just want to do something different in a business, and their skills are, they might be amazing at trading grain or selling it, but and we're not using the right skills. So how do they deal with that in these businesses?
I mean, that recruitment thing is something that a lot of families spend a lot of time talking about. I'm just going to skip back 1 second. I'm still not forgetting that question, Will. But you talked about the Farming Resilience Fund, and it was really something that set me on my journey in the first place. Was I met this guy called Sean Rickard, and he said this great number of and okay, he said 60,000 UK farmers are going out of business in the next 7 years. Well, he's quite a controversial character, if you've ever met him, but I just joked, I mean, what if he's half right?
It's a lot of people still.
There's a lot of lives changed. Yeah, there's a lot of change coming, and this loss of subsidy that we know, okay, we're at half levels at the moment, but there's a lot of people very dependent on that. And so what's that going to look like in 2028 when it's not there? But then you add on top of that, you add on this sort of extreme weather that we're having. I mean, we've got, I was talking to Millennium Farmers last night at the George at Stamford. We had a lovely meal, thank you.
That's another little commercial. It's not sponsored by the George at Stamford, just for the avoidance of doubt. But it is a fine place.
I was going to say other nice hotels in Stamford, but they're probably not any as nice. I started with the weather, and the weather we've had this year, they haven't been seen in a generation or the generation before. I mean, we had the hottest June ever. I mean, so the extreme weather we've got is incredible as an extra level of stress on top of the subsidy. We've got labour shortages that we're struggling with. We've got rising input costs. We've got volatile markets. And so we've got...
volatile is understating the way markets have moved. The geopolitical drivers that are completely outside of the control of a domestic market, a domestic government, let alone our own businesses. It's extraordinary setting, isn't it?
That is incredible. Just the pressure on these farming families. And that's let alone how do we get on together? Well, just the day-to-day stuff that they're having to deal with. It's incredible. Back to recruitment, because I'm sorry, you asked me a question of recruitment. Yes, they do spend a lot of time talking about this. So who do we want in these businesses? The generations coming up, do we just let anyone come in? And so these businesses are really talking about this because they want to be fair. And the family charter is really thinking of what are we going to fall out about? Okay, you and me, Will, we're brothers. What are we going to fall out about? So how do we work out how the next generation come in? And so they would say, okay, we're not brothers, by the way.
Yeah, for the avoidance of that, we're not brothers, but we could pretend for this moment, we could say you've got successors because you've got kids, I don't have kids. That sort of thing could be an example of an
exactly. But how do we, and do we let anyone join? And how do we do it? So they would say, well, and one farming business I met, they'd spent ages discussing this and agreeing on it. And they had agreed that they had to have a college education. So they weren't just going to let anyone join. They had to go and study and learn about agriculture and get a degree. But they also said they have to go out the farm for 2 years and work out in the big wide world and stand up on their own 2 feet. And so when they join the business, they've got some self-worth themselves, but also they're accepted into the business better. They're not just here because they happen to be the sons of the owner. They've been out in the wild. So they agreed they'd have a college education and they would have to have 2 years of paid full-time employment before they're allowed in that business. And I thought it's just a great way to set a standard, a high level standard. It might not be right for every family, but for that family, this was 4 cousins working together. For that family, they had decided, and this is all very personal, to another family will be totally different, but that's how they had decided, and that's something that was for them a problem or could have been a problem. So yeah, it's
a form of it's a training, isn't it? And then you're bringing skills into the business with those people coming back. So how do those businesses have a those most successful sort of family businesses have a way of also dealing with personal development as well, because in our professional roles, you're constantly involved in professional development, constantly being trained in new things and try and lift your skills. You did a Worshipful Company of Farmers management course in 2020. I did the leadership course earlier this year. How important is that in these really successful family businesses?
So one of the things that I saw in all of these family businesses that were engaged with these family charters, they all had continuous learning. So it was something that was in their DNA, and staying current and informed, keeping up to date with technology and sustainability developments. They were investing in training for themselves, but also their people. And they held that in high regard. So all about improving skills and knowledge base. And in the words of Jim Collins, sharpening the saw. That's what he calls it. Sharpening the saw.
That sounds a tad dangerous as well. You probably wouldn't want any family conflict with the sharp saws, but anyway, that's probably another. That's a bit.
But you can't go to work, Will, with a blunt saw. So you have to have a sharp saw so that you keep yourself sharp and you can able to do the job well. So so no, absolutely, you need to have a mindset of continuous learning.
It's interesting because I'm then wondering, in the sort of non-family businesses or the non-family managed businesses, because lots of businesses are owned by families still, but actually they're managed by by employees perhaps, and appointed roles. But as to whether the things that define really strong successful businesses in a family setting or non-family setting are actually quite similar things in a business sense, but what differs is that in the family businesses they recognize the role of family in the decision making, and their governance structure embraces the fact that the family are there. But the things they're doing, the personal development, the fitting people's skills to roles, the having a purpose to the business, the charter, are all things that actually any business to be successful needs, surely.
They're nearly mirror images. So in fact, Horst Schultz, it wasn't a family business per se, but he said no, it's all the same stuff. And it basically, you have to understand, you have to be really good at your numbers, a number ninja. You have to look after your people. So Horst, he told me about this study in America, and he said they'd done this big study on what motivates people. And this is why I was interested. I went to the Ritz-Carlton. They've got people cleaning toilets and making beds, and you'd say pretty not low skilled, but mundane. Some of the stuff there.
Repetitive.
Yeah, and so, okay, we're doing similar stuff, and we're not cleaning toilets in agriculture, but we're doing some mundane stuff, repetitive stuff at times. And how do you motivate these people? And he told me about this this big research project that happened in America, and number 7 on the list was money. And we think we're just going to pay somebody another £1 an hour and they'll be happy, but it's not true. Number 1 on the list was a sense of belonging, and number 2 on the list was empowerment. And he said these are the things that we should be looking at, we should be focusing on with what we're doing. And so I know when I tried to do some of this, so I set up a farm logo, and we got branded clothing, and I sort of tried to bring people together, get sort of a theme of excellence going, and people looking after things, and regular meetings, better communication, all sorts of things to try and help in this sort of sense of belonging. But then this empowerment thing, and I saw that at James Timpson. He's got this crazy structure where it's totally upside down management structure. And basically the lead doesn't sit at the top, he sits at the bottom, and he empowers everybody in front of him to basically just get on and do a good job. So there's a lot of trust, and really it's trust. Trust is the thing that you're trying to create. in these family businesses, and trust is at the heart of it.
I think that's a brilliant point at which probably to stop. I've got 3 words sitting in my mind there: trust, belonging, and purpose to these businesses that are quite not unique in any sense to successful businesses in general, but strongly related to the personal relationships that people have, and how those relate to professional relationships as well. Peter, I've thoroughly enjoyed doing this. There are more questions I could ask, but I'm conscious we've recorded, I think, we're 30-35 minutes now, and we normally go for short ones, but I didn't want to cut this one off because this was earlier, because this is brilliant. So I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot from reading your report. I would encourage anybody else to listening to go and look up Peter's report, which you can Google and find via the Nuffield website. And I'm sure you will find it interesting and enjoyable to read. Peter, thank you very, very much.
No, thank you, Will. Thoroughly enjoyed it.